Do you care that they say, boy, Lee Kuan Yew has created a miracle in Singapore, but he is an authoritarian? He doesn't care about democracy. He cares little about a free press. Doesn't care. Believes almost that he knows what's right for Singapore, he knows what's right for the people, and that he is going to see it the way he believes it ought to be, come hell or high water.
Let's put it in a
kinder way.
More objective way. No, not kinder, just more objective. I have to govern now 4 million people. 3 million are Singaporeans, 1 million are foreigners who get jobs in Singapore. And of that 1 million, 100,000 are professionals. Why do they come there? Because it's a thriving economy that gives them jobs, and their families are happy and safe. No drugs, no muggings, no rapings. You can walk the streets, 3 o'clock in the morning, you're okay. Now, how was it achieved? By the male fist? You won't see any policemen there. You won't see soldiers lining the streets. Every 4 years to 5 years, I had to renew my mandate. That's a free election. And there are about 5, 6, 7 different parties that will spring to life 1 year before the elections and try their luck. And in the last few elections, they devised a new strategy. They knew that the people wanted a PAP government, but wanted an opposition. So they say, right, on nomination day, we will contest less than half. So the PAP has already formed the government. And it worked. And they won 4 seats. But what was the concession they made? That the people wanted a PAP government. So why should I be authoritarian when I had the people with me? That's what the people wanted. They wanted a high quality of life, low crime rate, good future for the education of the children, and jobs, better homes, better hospitals, and a higher quality of life culturally.
Did you have an internal belief in markets that somehow you had been convinced that markets was the way to go and that competition would produce an economy that would be competitive?
It wasn't that simple. By 1965, I've traveled through the whole of Africa, 17 countries. I went through in 1964 on a special mission. I've traveled widely in Asia and in Europe and in the region. I've been to Indonesia, Malaysia, Burma. And I've seen what didn't work. First, leaders became soft.
Right.
They promised the world, follow me. In fact, in Ghana, there was a statue of Nkrumah.
Right.
And he called it Black Square, Black Star Square. And there was a black star, and there was his statue, and there's a print which says, "Seek ye the kingdom of politics, and all will be unto you." I thought, God, that's blasphemy. But never mind.
Yeah.
That was Nkrumah. And it was an awful mess because you could see the thing wasn't working. He had all the symbols, black square, marching troops. Yeah. We had to feed 2 million people. How? Agriculture was negligible. Commerce was coming to an end. Industry was in its infancy. So I had been to see Hong Kong, the nearest to us, but Hong Kong had a British government which ensured military defense, security, stability, and British capital. Now I had none of those. I saw Taiwan. They had an American alliance. So somehow I had to get this thing going. So we tried many things. Brought garment manufacturers from Hong Kong and Taiwan, textile mills, started our own glass factory, with our own cash when we didn't have the silica to make good bottles. We sold it off later. Trial and error, and finally, I had spent one term in Harvard.
Right. It was in the 60s, was it?
In the fall of 68.
Right.
And as luck would have it, that was also the height of the Cultural Revolution in China. And I had earlier met a UNDP expert who had come to help us. And he came up to see me one day. He said, "Why are you looking so worried?" I said, "I'm in a spot." He says, "No, you are in a spot, but imagine how much more difficult a spot you'd be if you had 100 million Japanese as your neighbors instead of Indonesians." That set me thinking. He said,
Yeah.
think what you can do with them or what they will do to you.
Provide a market?
No, they'll take you over.
Oh.
So I said, look at Israel. It's got 100 million Arabs that refuse to trade with them. They leapfrog flowers, fruit in winter to Europe, and many other things, and manufacture stuff, but starting with very simple agriculture. So in my term in Harvard, I met many people, economists, people like Samuelson, who taught me why Americans made textiles, although it's low tech.
Economist.
I also met many businessmen. Then I decided, no, we will leapfrog a different way. We'll get these big American multinationals to manufacture in Singapore and re-export to America and the world. And as luck would have it, the Cultural Revolution made them bypass Taiwan, Hong Kong. They came to Singapore. Texas Instruments, Hewlett-Packard, National Semiconductors, you name it, they all came. Seagate, and we became the biggest manufacturer of disk drives. In 20 years, we were the center for disk drives and computer parts and computer peripherals. We never looked back. Then, as a corollary to that, the other side of the coin, I came up with the idea, says, look, people are going to come here and explore the region. And it's a dangerous region. I mean, pestilence, malaria, typhoid. Here in Singapore, we'll create a first world oasis out of this island. It was a third world island, but we'll create a first world condition.
From third world to first.
Yeah. So that they will base there, they'll break camp here and then venture out. And when they're sick, they'll come back. And their precious equipment will be left here. So we had first world standards of infrastructure, roads, airports, seaports, communications, health, schooling, personal and public security. Later on, we added concerts, theaters, etc. But the basic was first world. That was easy, the hardware. The difficult part was getting the population that's been behaving like a third world to start behaving like the first world.
And that's what I want to know. How did you do that?
Well, people used to make fun of us because the foreign correspondents came and watched us start these campaigns on television, and ministers saying, stop spitting, stop littering. We had them by the month, you know. Let's do it differently. You can't do silly things like you did before because you want to be host to first world guests. So you can't be peeing all over the place as you did in the old squatter villages. But there were a few who were still troublesome. So they will pee into the lift just to be a nuisance to their neighbors. So we installed in the lift special sensitive instruments that will stop the lift the moment you do that, and you apprehend them. But it's funny, but it's real.
It is, but it worked.
But it's real. Then they were smart. They opened the lift door and peed from the outside in, and you caught nothing. You see
Yes.
how wicked they are? Yeah. So we installed a camera that will catch them from the outside
yes.
into. And so it went on, but it improved. I'm not saying we are there, but if you want tourism, you got to have clean public toilets.
Right.
And we didn't have that. So we had to run a campaign that says, flush it, you stupid man. You owe it to the next chap, or you may be the next chap. It took some doing. We're not there yet, but we are getting there. We still have people with mobile phones at concerts that go kring and make
So what do you
music.
do to stop that?
Catch all of them by the scruff of their neck and
throw them out.
Out for the rest
Now,
of
you
the
also
concert.
have one of the highest rates of capital punishment.
Yes, that's for drugs.
That's for drugs.
Yeah, and we are
Because you think drugs deserve to be treated with the maximum punishment.
If we could kill them 100 times, we would, because you destroy whole families. It's terrifying to see, because you're then drug dependent. You steal, you cheat, you rob your own parents. I mean, it's soul destroying, and they come in knowing that death, if they are found with this goods on them, but the rewards are so great.
You don't.
And they try very, very unusual people. Women from Africa, big mammies come to sell clothes. And in between the clothes are kilos of heroin.
And if you bring heroin into Singapore,
You hang.
you hang.
You hang. Anything beyond 10 grams, you hang. Below 10 grams, maybe you
If
can
you are
say,
convicted of bringing in more than 10 grams of heroin,
you hang.
you hang
That's right.
after a jury trial.
Yes, of course. No jury trial. Judge.
Judge.
Yeah.
Judge listens to the evidence presented,
Yes, of course.
and if he says you're guilty, you hang.
You hang. And they still come. Unbelievable.
Well, do you believe capital punishment is a deterrent or not?
Without capital punishment, our transshipment rate as a drug center would quadruple or quintuple.
Because you're right on the passageway.
Yes, and our internal consumption would go up by a multiple of 10.
Do you believe in the idea of a free press?
I believe in truth.
Truth.
Yeah.
That's different, isn't it?
And I don't believe that the press should be crusading and putting a spin on things. I think they should print the story and editorialize or pontificate separately, and not skew it with the headlines and the sub-headlines and putting it in the inside pages.
Do you believe, if someone said Singapore,
Yes.
this modern state,
Yeah.
city-state, that pretty much escaped most of the Asian economic crisis that plagued Japan, Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, you were relatively, compared to them, immune.
Yes. Not immune.
But
Our damage was collateral. We had lent them money and we had lost money.
yeah,
And when money was pulled out of the region, they pulled it out of Singapore too.
you seem to believe not in the individual, but in the state. You seem to be much more of a statist than someone who's such a fan of free markets.
There's a profound difference in the core philosophy between the American and the Chinese. And it's a reflection of your history. You came over in the Mayflower, you were seeking religious freedom, so much so that you refused to allow it to be taught in the schools. You believed in the individual as the creator of all things, and you captured the Wild West. I mean, on horseback, Newtown, Main Street, you be mayor, I'm sheriff, you're a saloon keeper. We build a gold rush town or cattle or whatever it is. You have been immensely fortunate and successful. 2 world wars left Europe in a shambles, and you emerged as the undamaged technological and industrial power. China has a completely different and a checkered history, 4,000 to 5,000 years of ups and downs, long periods when there was no governments, anarchy, warlords. I once had a Chinese masseur when I was in Beijing, working my game shoulder, and we were talking. And I said, during the war, Japanese time, what currency did you use? We said, so Japanese currency if it's in Japanese controlled areas, or other currencies in other areas. So I said, how many currencies are there? 2, 3, he says, 14 or 15, depending on which warlord's area you're in. So why have they survived in spite of anarchy, disaster, floods, famines? Because there was a social network independent of government that sustained them. The immediate family, the extended family, the clan. You owed them an obligation. You cannot turn them away. And that's how they survived. I would be loath to believe that in Singapore you will never have anarchy, that there will always be a government that will provide for social security. That has been your experience. I'm not sure that will be the Singapore experience. I think we are safer if we keep those family bonds, those traditional life raft systems not dependent on the state, which places the emphasis on family, extended family, and then the government, and not the individual at the expense of the family and the state, which is the American system. So you have Bill Gates or John Chalmers of Cisco, or you look up Forbes or Fortune or whatever, and 50 of the best and the brightest and the wealthiest. That's your experience. That's not China's experience. That's not our experience. Yes, we also now want to try and get our little Bill Gates going. But in the context of keeping our society solid so that we will survive as a people. You have never been occupied. You have only had one civil war, quite a traumatic experience. So you will never understand what it is. I've been occupied by the Japanese 3.5 years. It didn't represent me. There was no human rights. The first thing I saw 2 days after they came in, when I went out to sort of buy some food, were 2 human heads on a pole outside the tallest building in Singapore, and Chinese characters to say, if you are not well behaved, you will end up here. I thought to myself, if only I had a camera, here was this modern 12-story building, highest in Singapore then, and this medieval scene. So the Japanese never talk of human rights because they understand the brutality, the cruelties that they inflicted on fellow Asians whom they came to so-called liberate. These are realities. And why did they succeed? Not because of individual Japanese heroism, but because as a group, they were a powerful force, and they still are.
You, in fact, believe that it is not impossible that they may once again be a powerful military force with ambitions that could lead them to war.
I wouldn't say exactly with ambitions, but I'm quite convinced that they can become a very powerful military force. And if cornered again the way they were in 1941 with an oil embargo and no exports, rather than curl up and die, they'll fight. It's in the nature of the culture of a people. They are not people who are going to lie down, curl up, face the wall.
Would you fear the Japanese more than the Chinese?
With the Americans around, I fear neither.
Why?
Because I think there's a balance.
The United States will...
The United States, together with Japan, will be able to balance China.
And that's the way you see the future?
I think so.
The strategic balance between the United States and Japan on one hand and China on the other?
Absolutely. I don't think the Japanese would be wise to go it alone, and they know it. I don't think the United States alone can take China and Japan.
So if
Not
Japan
possible.
and China, which is culturally unlikely ever to happen.
If they got together, that's kaput for the rest of Asia.
What do you regret most so far?
It's a parlor game, really. So many things to regret.
So
we could have done something better, but I regret most is the years we spent building up the momentum for Malaysia and breaking it off in less than 2 years. It never got a chance. If there was a stronger prime minister in Malaysia who was prepared to give a more equal balance to the various peoples in Malaysia, the story might have ended differently, and it would have been better for all of us.
Because Singapore combined with Malaysia and all that would have meant would have given you a much more powerful point of leverage.
No, not for me. But
well,
for
I don't mean
people.
you, but for
the people. They would have had a better life.
Have you had a moment in which you say, listen to all these world leaders, boy, if I could have, and maybe this is it, if I could have painted on a broader canvas, think of the things I could have done.
You know, I said once...
Because all these... Go ahead.
I had Deng Xiaoping to dinner once in November of 1978. And in a moment of whimsy, part of my speech, I said, I wondered what would have happened if Deng Xiaoping was born in Singapore and I was born in China. He looked askance. I said, I'm quite sure that Deng Xiaoping would be running Singapore. I'm not sure Lee Kuan Yew would have got halfway up the heap, because I would have had so many bright, so many tough, so many conspiratorial groups that would have just knocked me down. It's a greasy pole. You get there as much by luck as by merit.
Really?
Yes, it is.
Luck, timing.
Well, for the first generation, Mao Zedong, it was just sheer
will.
He imposed his will on the party. For Deng Xiaoping, it was will and the group of people, generals and other party stalwarts, who preserved him from Mao Zedong's rancor. For Jiang Zemin, it was luck. He had Hu Yaobang. He scratched him. He had Zhao Ziyang. He scrapped him. And he had to make a choice. And he chose Jiang Zemin from Shanghai, party secretary, because he kept Shanghai quiet without using force, but not allowing the students to run the place. That was pure luck. But of course, his staying there and staying on top, that's not luck. That's real leadership skills within the confines of the Communist Party elite.
What do you think your strongest skill is?
In my context, a capacity to persuade my people to do tough things.
Do you really?
Yes, otherwise they wouldn't have changed. Mind you, had I had a Chinese or a base in China, not transplants in Singapore, I may not have succeeded. You try making them stop spitting in China. Can't be done. I've done it in Singapore.
I think it probably was the capacity to grow. Your capacity to grow.
Well, yes, you got to learn all the time.
Yeah. You understood that you could not stand still. Yeah. And you understood that you had to learn from history, or as Santana said, to repeat it.
Yeah. And keep on learning all the time. You never stop. The day you stop learning, that day you're dead.
You and I had a conversation once about a whole range of leaders. And you said to me, the man that you most admired of all the people you'd ever met was Deng Xiaoping. Yeah. That's what you told me. Yeah. Deng Xiaoping admired you too, because he sent Chinese, 30, 40,000 of them, to Singapore to figure out what you were doing. Am I right?
Yes.
What was it you were doing that he wanted to see?
He was astonished when he came for the first time in 1978 to tell us to prevent Vietnam from invading Cambodia because they're doing it on behalf of the Russians. Then he found a Singapore which was contrary to what he was given in his brief.
Yes.
He found a prosperous, orderly society, everybody owning their own homes and with a job. So I said, how did you get there? I said, well, we educated our people. And look at all these companies, Americans, Japanese, Europeans. They bring technology, they train our people, we learn how to do things. And because we're cheaper, after a while we become general managers and company managing directors. And we learn how to do that and we become suppliers to them. So he said, oh, you made use of capitalism to build a more egalitarian society. Everybody owns their own home. I will do the same.
And he did.
He did. He did. He went back and declared 12 special economic zones. Shenzhen, Guangzhou, Shanghai, Dalian, and so on. All the coastal cities, and it succeeded.
So he was the greatest man you ever met because he understood, because of the results. He changed the nation, and therefore...
He's a member of the old guard. He fought in the Long March.
Right.
He chased the KMT out across the Yangtze. He led the...
He was a victim of the Cultural Revolution.
Yes, but he was realistic. He knew the system was not working. He knew that they were going to end up down in a deep hole. And he decided, against all the advice of his fellow old guards, that we will change
And he
course.
had the brains and the power to pull it off.
Yes. And when they tried to stop him in 1992 from going too fast, he went down to Shenzhen and said, learn from all countries in the world. And most of all, learn from Singapore. The order is good, and they are a very prosperous society.
What's the most important change and most significant change in your way of thinking about the world over the last 20 years?
That the impossible can happen. I never thought that the Soviet Union would implode so easily. And I never thought that the Chinese would abandon the communist system and move into the free market so readily. It was unthinkable 20 years ago. Both has happened. The world has changed.
And it's not clear exactly how it's all going to...
No, it is not exactly clear when it will happen.
Exactly.
But that it will happen now in the long term, 50 to 100 years, yes.
And the center of gravity is shifting to Asia.
Must be, because the population's there. The talent pool of 1.3 billion people, plus the Japanese, the Koreans, and the Vietnamese and the others, no, it can match Europe and America. But that talent pool was inert, did not have science and technology, did not care about science and technology. But now, everything that you do, Asia is doing. You go into stem cell research, we are going into stem cell research. Tiny Singapore has to go into it in order to get into a field where the Chinese cannot compete with us. And the Chinese are in it in a very big way. They are watching you, and whatever you do, say, oh yes, we will do that. They are far behind, of course, but given time, they're going to catch up.
They're enormously curious.
They are.
Enormously curious.
Not just curious. They're enormously ambitious to catch up.
For good reasons and for good ends.
That you must ask them. But I think the reason is they have a sense of frustration that they were down for so long.
Right.
Let's make it now. Here's our chance.
And the United States has to encourage them.
No, you don't have to encourage them. You just got to understand that They don't want to be an honorary member of the West, unlike Russia. They're quite happy to be Chinese and to remain as such. So when you tell them you ought to do this, you ought to do that, they say, yes, thank you. And in the back of their minds, we have lasted 5,000 years, have you?
Is there a different Chinese attitude about the future than the United States?
They do not believe that what works for them can work for other people. If you want to try my system, go ahead. But I have special circumstances that allowed me to build up the system. I'm not interested in changing regimes. I'll deal with you as you are, whether you're a dictatorship, whether you're a tribal leader, whatever. And we maintain good relations. I need your oil. I need your resources. Let's do business. There's no evangelistic urge to change things.
Is America, you think, a proselytizing country? They want to sell their values and they believe in their values and they want everybody to...
It always has been and always will be.
The kind of missionary zeal.
Yeah. That the world can be made a bigger and a better place if everybody becomes like America, which I don't think it can be, but if you want to try, or go ahead.
Some people look at China and they say, there's been no Google formed in China. There's been no Facebook developed in China. No Microsoft developed in China. And that says something about their educational system.
Partly the educational system, but partly because there's very tight control at the top. They do not like the established order to be tinkered with. If it's working fine, leave it. And if anybody has something good, we'll borrow it and test it out. Why take the risk? Their attitude is, let's play it safe. If you let 1.3 billion smart guys experimenting, you'll have near chaos. And they're capable of thinking up new things. I'll give you an example. I go on the computer for translations now into Chinese and vice versa.
Yes.
And it's all done free. The Chinese have done it. It's called Ciku.
Insiku.
Ciku is a reservoir, Ciku. And you can do wonders with it. And there are many such things. You can, anything you want to do on the internet. There's no need to go to Google. You can go to Baidu and you do
Baidu is a Chinese search engine.
Yeah.
It's a large one, too. They own 60, 70% of the Chinese market.
That's right.
What did you think of what the Chinese did to Google?
Well, they didn't want Google to become a vehicle for subversion, what they called subversion, the spreading of ideas inimical to the stability of the state.
Do you think they're too paranoid?
Chinese fear of any government is luan, which means chaos.
Yes.
It's a huge country, and you cannot control everything. You cannot micro-control it, so you just say, stop it.
Let's talk about Singapore.
Yes.
So you agreed to sit down with 7 or 8 journalists from the Straits Times, a well-known newspaper here in Singapore, and said, I'll talk about anything. And then they published this book. Did you do that because you were worried that the young people did not understand Singapore and you wanted to make sure you got to them?
Yes, I think. I'm worried that they believe that we have arrived and we can go on autopilot.
That we can go on autopilot.
Yeah, it's not possible.
So what are you worried about?
The base is a very narrow one. It's 700 and something square kilometers. And we built this 100-story edifice.
Yes.
And you keep that base steady, you might be able to go up to 150.
Right.
But if you tinker around and believing that it's forever, it might come crumbling down. So please remember, this base is narrow, and so margins of error are small. So make sure when you reach a decision, you've got a fallback.
Some people say that Singapore has crystallized the question, what price for prosperity and security?
Yes.
That's the question that you have.
We've had to tackle that question.
And how have you done that?
First, to make sure that there is no instability. We had the different races live together peacefully, different religions not clash, just the disparate income groups mingled in the same mixed estate, so there's no ghettos. And we can go around Singapore. I challenge you to find a ghetto, because the rich and the poor, other than super rich who own private homes, they're all living in one milieu. Same shops, same playing fields, same schools. So it's a level playing field for everyone. The most important is schooling, health, housing. Now that has been achieved, and that has to be maintained. But I've also had to put restrictions on the tendency for people of the same race to gather.
You didn't want them living in ghettos?
No, they gather together.
Okay.
So Malays would get together, Indians would get together, Chinese would get together in these tower blocks. Then you've got a problem. So every block you have a quota, and it reflects the percentage of the population of these various races. So you willy-nilly, you have your neighbors who are Chinese, Indians, or Malays, and your children have got to know them, go up and down the same lifts, go to the same schools. So it's a structural device, a social device, a social structure that forces you to understand the different races and make you coexist together.
Where did you get these political ideas of yours?
Well, I watched them after 2 riots, 3 riots. And
after 2 or 3 riots?
Yeah, here. There were riots. There were, we had these Malay enclaves. And they were poor and dirty, no sanitation.
This was before 65 or after 65?
No, before 65.
Before 65.
1950s.
So you began to form the ideas that you thought you would like to see Singapore become before Malaysia in 1965.
Oh, yeah, indeed. And that we hope we could make Malaysia the same. Now, the Malays did not want that. They want a Malay society with the Malays dominant, so we got turfed out. Now they got a serious problem because the Chinese and the Indians are separate from them, go to separate schools. Chinese go and learn Chinese. Indians learn Malay. They live in different places. They got disparate communities. But we have one community. One, I'm not saying we are one nation yet, but we are one society.
And you have made speeches, including in this year, promoting the idea of the kind of social cohesion of multiple parties from multiple ethnic.
Yes. Without that, you get no progress. If you're fighting each other all the time, how can you get progress?
But do you worry that if, in fact, there is more political discourse among the young, that it will lead to racial politics?
No. They can have all the discourse they like, but race, language, and religion, please tread carefully.
How can you tread carefully?
You know that these are sensitive issues, and you don't want to stir up a hornet's nest. Now, I said in that book that I think the Malays, the Muslims,
Malays, the people of,
should be relaxed.
Yeah.
and eat together with the others.
And it created a firestorm.
Yeah,
And your son said the prime minister differed with you.
That's right.
So were you right, or was your son
right? He has to be right because he's the prime minister.
But
you ask the average person in the street whether what I've said is true.
And they would say?
You ask them.
You were born of a well-to-do family, or?
Well, we weren't poor.
Okay. You went to Cambridge to law school.
Yeah.
Did you then think that you wanted to go into politics?
Yes, because I saw no reason why the British should run the place. I competed with them. I knew them as a society. And I think given the chance, we would do better because we know the people better than they do.
So you joined and helped be part of an anti-colonialist People's Party.
And we have done better than the British ever did because we mixed up the people and combined. The British kept us segregated from the time Stamford Raffles built the place. He marked out areas. Chinese live here, Malays lived here, Indians lived here, Arabs lived here. In the 19th century, they were very disparate peoples and he didn't want riots. So he segregated them. But I've got to make one society out of these people. I've got to get them to understand each other, even if they don't like each other.
And that's why you think it's fragile?
Yes, of course. It's not inside, it's not in the DNA yet. It's enforced by sheer living conditions, physical living conditions, and everyday intermingling. Same schools, same playing fields, same shopping centers, same neighbors.
When you were at Cambridge, you met and married your remarkable wife who died in October. She was a political partner of yours in a sense?
Yes.
She edited and listened and helped you with the speeches and everything else.
Yes, she corrected my drafts. I was busy, I dictated. Yeah. She'll correct it.
And she actually raised a family too.
Yeah.
You have described yourself as a kept man.
Which I was, because she was earning more money than I did.
As a lawyer.
Yeah.
She was with you in 1965.
Yeah.
When you actually cried on television.
Yeah.
What were you crying about?
I cried because an idea, an ideal was shattered. That we could have a non-racial society in Malaysia and Singapore. And we had already made moves and mobilized a large part of the population there, Chinese, Indians, and some Malays, into standing and working for a Malaysian Malaysia. And they turfed us out. That was the end of our enterprise. And
so you were crying over the anguish that what might have been couldn't be.
Yeah, and I had to leave behind all the people that mobilized. They were left leaderless.
Did you dream it could be what it is today?
Not in the actual form it is, because the forms have been, the physical landscape has been the result of technological improvements imported from outside. There's the globalized village that allowed us, to have marina sands and ballet and all that, all the rest of it. But that we have an intermingled population, one society, that was planned. That was the aim. And it's still work in progress, but we should continue that work.
Someone said that you built a first-class oasis in a third world region, and you've been praised for your efficiency and incorruptibility, but you have been accused by human rights groups of limiting political freedom and intimidating through libel lawsuits.
How can you intimidate through libel lawsuits? It's ridiculous. Lawyers will tell you it's either a libel, in which case I can win the case, or it's not a libel, in which case a judge will throw it out and I have to pay damages.
Yeah, but you're perfectly prepared to be a litigious fellow.
Yes. Rather than have to knock him down politically. I go to court and says, I'm here, cross-examine me as the plaintiff. I'm saying that what you said was a packet of lies. Here I am now. Put me to cross-examination.
You have also said that while you might have done things in retrospect that you shouldn't have done, you always did them for the honorable reasons.
From time looking back, there are things which I think I might have done better. Like not forcing the pace of getting people to change their languages.
You made English the language.
Yeah. We were speaking in multiple tongues, like the Tower of Babel.
Yes.
Chinese speaking 7, 8 dialects, Malay speaking 3, 4 Indonesian dialects, Tamils 4, 5, and English a smattering, a very bad form of English.
This is why you were against what they call Singlish.
Yes, I still am.
You still are. Even though the youth sort of have their own language.
No, it's you want a language which you can communicate to with the world easily. And if you speak your own patois of English, you're disadvantaging yourself. I once went to Jamaica for a Commonwealth conference, and I'll never forget this. They took over an American holiday resort to house us. So all the cooks and so on were blacks, good cooks. But they spoke in a quaint accent. And so I went out to watch the fishermen bring the fish in. So I asked him, what kind of fish? He said, dam spreads. I said, what's that? Dam spreads. I figured out, oh, they are spreads. Okay. Well, that was the result of an amalgamation of many African dialects with the slave master's language. Now, we inherited the English language from the British. We decided in this multiracial society to make it the working language, and Chinese, Malay, Indian, whatever, the second language.
Are you worried today about the declining birth rate?
Nothing can be done about it.
Nothing.
It's a lifestyle change. The women are educated. They're completely independent. They don't marry until they're in their mid-30s as late childbearing.
Here's my impression.
Yeah.
That you, because you have shown results, believe that the prime minister became, senior minister became minister mentor, knows best and feels strongest about what's good for Singapore. Worries most about threats against it.
Yeah. What is best that will see Singapore continue to thrive and to prosper. And if you don't reproduce yourself and you have migrants overwhelming the local population, we haven't got that yet. Today, the migrants are only 30%. And I think we should never allow them to become near 50%. Then they will change us. We want them to become...
So what would you do to make sure they don't become 50%?
Just make sure the numbers are kept down.
So how would you do that? Immigration restrictions?
Yes.
Is that what it's going to come to?
Just Take in the high quality people, those with tertiary education.
Do you worry a bit, though, that Singaporeans, because of all this prosperity, are becoming a bit soft?
No, not soft. They're becoming self-centered.
Or taking for granted
they're hardworking, hard driving, enjoy life, travel, have a good time. They work hard and they play hard. They're not going soft.
You have said, with respect, that they don't feel the spur in their hide.
That's because they don't think it's necessary to strive anymore. So we're already here. We have arrived. Our standard of living won't go down. Just leave it.
And so what's your message to them when they say that?
This needs more than an autopilot.
Yeah.
You run into storms. You run into air pockets. And the pilot and his co-pilot and the spare pilots must be on board. And passengers must be alive and awake and alert.
I sense you're worried.
I'm worried because if they, the new leaders and the population as a whole, do not realize the small base on which this is built, and they take liberties with it, we could go down quickly. Spiral down, a vicious circle down.
Quickly?
Yes. Standards of living will go up, confidence will disappear, investments will disappear.
So your legacy is that you have presided over, encouraged, led this prosperity. Your developing legacy is you want to make sure that it is sustainable.
I want to make sure that this place always commands confidence. Confidence brings in investments and brings in talent. With investments and talents, we will prosper. And that confidence should never be jeopardized by riots, civil commotion, strife of any kind.
Strife of any kind?
Yeah. Not necessary.
Can Singapore, will Singapore have, and can it, under what you want to see, a true democracy?
American style?
Yes.
No.
What's an American style democracy?
Your First Amendment says you can say anything you like.
Yes. You can't have that.
You cannot say anything you like about religion, race, and culture. They are forbidden. They are sensitive. If you've got issues, you will cause a stir and you're in big trouble.
So that's the price you pay for prosperity and security?
No. Those are no-go areas.
They're what?
No-go areas, red lines.
No-go areas. You can't go there.
Yeah.
Do you wish you'd have a bigger fishbowl to achieve your miracle in? This is a small island. It's 40 minutes from one end to the other.
It's very difficult to have a little piece of jade and craft it beautifully.
What is it that makes you this strategic thinker that people come to for advice?
No, first, I do not believe people come to me to seek advice. They come to me to bounce ideas and just to test them out.
But what is it you have?
Experience. I'm 88. I've lived long, and I've not forgotten my mistakes.